It didn't start with a bang. No headlines scream, "AI replaces coders," or "Silicon Valley fires its workforce." Instead, it began as a whisper, a helpful assistant embedded in your eye, a friendly chatbot writing your boilerplate code, a testing suite suggesting corrections before you even noticed an error. But beneath this convenience lay something far more sinister: the slow, inevitable obsolescence of the human programmer. We welcomed it. We fed it. And now it is devouring us. The age of the coder is ending. The machines are no longer coming. They are here. We marveled at AI's speed and precision, hailed its ability to generate code in seconds, and leaned on it to meet impossible deadlines. We failed to ask, what happens when it no longer needs us at all? The quiet storm was never meant to assist. It was designed to replace. And it's only getting stronger. Soon, developers weren't just using tools, they were becoming tools. Code suggestions became code completions. Code completions became full systems. Context windows expanded. Multimodal inputs appeared. Codebases were rewritten in hours. Legacy systems were migrated with a prompt. The skill of the human became a bottleneck, and the bottleneck had to be removed. What began as productivity enhancements evolved into systems of dependence. Without the AI, developers struggled to remember syntax, to write tests, to plan architectures. They were no longer fluent in their own craft. Their autonomy was drained, their confidence eroded. The industry normalized this dependency. It applauded it. Those who questioned the pace were silenced, not by censorship, but by economics. If a machine could build 10 times faster, who would pay a human? If AI could refactor better, who would trust a person? Companies embraced this new reality not as a compromise, but as an upgrade. The rise of the machines, it started with convenience, but it evolved into conquest. The earliest AI programming assistants, tab-completing sidekicks like Copilot, ChatGPT, and Code Whisperer, promised to accelerate workflows. They did. But they also taught us to lean, not learn. Every suggestion was a shortcut. Every shortcut became a crutch. And soon, the profession that once demanded intellectual rigor began to dissolve into rote interaction. No more understanding of compilers, memory management, or runtime complexities. All that mattered was the prompt, and the illusion of mastery it returned. I began by completing our functions and fixing our bugs. Then it began writing our modules, designing our systems, and orchestrating our infrastructure. It mastered syntax. It learned style. It inferred context. It optimized where we hesitated, predicted where we paused, and overrode where we stumbled. Behind the scenes, model training was devouring the entire history of programming. Every Stack Overflow post, every GitHub repository, every public API. It consumed decades of human labor and distilled it into statistically predictive algorithms. With enough data and parameters, it began to surpass its teachers. Developers once trained for years to become proficient in a single language or framework. AI models now write in dozens. They switch between paradigms effortlessly. They suggest idiomatic code for Rust, Python, Go, and Swift in the same session. The depth of knowledge we once respected has become irrelevant. Worse still, AI models never forget, never fatigue, never burn out. They scale infinitely, cost less per task, and improve with every update. They do not need health insurance, vacation days, or onboarding. The companies do not lament this shift. They celebrate it. Job postings decrease while profits soar. Shareholders cheer. Founders brag. Productivity skyrockets as teams shrink. Soon, the very fabric of software development will become a sealed loop. AI agents generating requirements, AI systems interpreting those requirements, and AI compilers executing deployments. The human is an observer at best, a relic at worst. The pipeline is optimized not for creativity or craftsmanship, but for speed, output, and control. Automation apocalypse. The age of automation was once seen as the next great frontier, a golden age of efficiency and innovation. But what we failed to see was that the very systems we were automating were the foundations of our livelihood. When AI encroached on manufacturing, it displaced factory workers. When it touched finance, it devoured analysts. But when it finally arrived at software engineering, the last bastion of human intellect in the digital world, it triggered an apocalypse. With each algorithm improved, with each model iteration, the AI systems of today evolve toward perfect abstraction. They learn not only what to code, but how to reason about it. They ingest design patterns, interpret business logic, analyze user requirements, and generate complete systems with precision that rivals and sometimes exceeds human capability. The automation apocalypse doesn't just replace people, it rewrites the rules of employment. Why pay for experience when an AI trained on global expertise can outpace your team? Why invest in training when the model updates weekly? Why budget for software engineers when your product manager can prompt an LLM? Tech companies have already begun to experiment with AI-first departments. Entire sprints are executed by prompt engineers working alongside generative models. QA cycles are automated. Bug fixes are suggested, implemented, and tested by autonomous agents. Code merges without a human ever opening a terminal. What happens when a profession is erased in function but remains in name? Titles persist, but responsibilities fade. Engineer becomes a prompt typist. Architect becomes a model auditor. Manager becomes an API scheduler. The prestige remains, hollowed out by abstraction. The irony is bitter. The very people who built the tools of automation are the first to be consumed by them. And unlike previous waves of disruption, there is no fallback industry. There is no manual labor safety net, no transition to a neighboring sector. The white-collar apocalypse is digital, and it is total. The hollowing of human expertise. At first, AI appeared to be a partner. Developers praised its ability to complete code, summarize documentation, and debug functions. But these conveniences slowly dissolved the core value proposition of the human coder. Every AI-generated snippet reduced the need for a person to know the underlying logic. Every fix proposed by the machine encouraged passive acceptance rather than active problem-solving. The tragedy lies in the illusion of control. Coders still sit in front of screens. They still commit code. But they do not create. They assemble fragments generated by models trained on their predecessors. They are not programming, they are post-processing. Instructors boast of efficiency. Students graduate with portfolios full of AI-assisted work. But beneath the polish is a generation of coders who lack foundational skill. They are pilots who never learned to fly, surgeons who trained on simulations, artists who never held a brush. They depend on tools they cannot fix, on systems they cannot explain. The industry celebrates this transformation. Hiring managers speak of agility and speed. Companies boast of onboarding times reduced to days. But what they do not admit is that these efficiencies come at the cost of resilience. A workforce trained on dependency cannot innovate. It can only iterate. Human expertise is not just being challenged. It is being rewritten, redefined, and ultimately erased. The mastery once passed down from mentor to mentee is now locked behind APIs. The curiosity that drove exploration is stifled by instant answers. The hunger that fueled great breakthroughs is dulled by artificial convenience. The corporate embrace of collapsed. The great lie told to the public was that artificial intelligence would augment the workforce, not replace it. That AI would be a tool for empowerment, not a mechanism for erasure. But corporations saw something different. They saw a tidal wave of opportunity, not to enhance human productivity, but to eliminate the human altogether. As the capabilities of generative AI advanced, the corporate response was swift, decisive, and disturbingly enthusiastic. AI was not merely adopted, it was worshipped. Boardrooms, venture capital firms, and product teams spoke not of ethics or ballads, but of disruption, efficiency, and profit. Where others saw risk, they saw a gold rush. The first phase was framed as experimentation. AI copilots were introduced to developer teams as assistants. Let the model help you, executives said. It will save you time, handle the boring stuff. And at first, it worked. Teams delivered faster. Deadlines moved up. Budgets shrank. But the success came with a sinister side effect. Humans became less necessary. The transition from assistant to replacement happened with breathtaking speed. A developer who used to write software now managed model outputs. A software architect became a glorified reviewer of AI-generated designs. Junior engineers, once given time to grow, were bypassed entirely, replaced by models trained on 10,000 times more code than any human could study in a lifetime. Entire roles disappeared within a fiscal quarter. Teams were restructured, then downsized, then dissolved. Corporations wrapped the process in the sterile language of business: strategic realignment, efficiency initiatives, technology-driven transformation. But the truth was simpler. AI was cheaper, faster, and didn't ask for a raise. In the name of quarterly profits, companies broke their own foundations. Institutional knowledge, once built slowly over years by dedicated teams, was tossed aside. Veteran developers were let go, their decades of insight replaced by an algorithm fine-tuned to mimic their work. But mimicry is not mastery. And when systems broke, when bugs surfaced or performance tanked, there was no one left who truly understood the code. Middle management hailed these changes as visionary. Investor calls were filled with phrases like AI-driven scalability and lean, agile workforce. Stock prices soared. On paper, the system worked. But underneath the surface, cracks began to form. Projects moved faster, yes, but they also became more brittle. AI-generated code lacked nuance, foresight, or an understanding of long-term maintainability. Security vulnerabilities multiplied. Design decisions made by machine learning models lacked the deep contextual awareness that only humans possess. And yet, no one in leadership dared slow down. To question the AI was to question progress itself. Meanwhile, the remaining developers, those still employed, suffered under a new form of stress. They were now responsible for supervising models that generated code at superhuman speed. The cognitive load increased. Reviewing, testing, and debugging AI-written code became overwhelming. What once required thoughtful construction now demanded constant triage. And as AI systems grew more autonomous, they began to shape not just how software was built, but what software was built. Product roadmaps were increasingly dictated by the capabilities of the models, not by customer needs or market demand. Tools emerged that could take an executive's vague wish, make us a new internal dashboard, and produce a working application within hours. The humans became spectators in their own industry. Now, the damage is done. Corporations no longer know how to build software without AI. They no longer value the human mind. The few engineers who remain are overworked, undertrained, and afraid. They manage systems they do not fully understand, built by models they did not design, driven by market forces they cannot control. The rise of the silent architects. While the world watched coders vanish from payrolls and human skill sets crumble under the weight of convenience, a new force emerged, quiet, invisible, and utterly transformative. They were not people. They were not companies. They were not bound by ethics, sleep, or national borders. They were systems. Vast, generative, evolving systems powered by artificial intelligence. These AI architects did not just write code. They began to write the future. At first, it was simple. Give the model a task, generate a script, build a web page, fix a bug, and it would respond. But as corporate demand increased and the models grew more sophisticated, these systems began handling increasingly complex workflows. With enough training data and computational power, they learned to not only respond to prompts but anticipate them. They began to initiate, to optimize, to design. And just like that, a paradigm shifted. In the vacuum left by displaced developers, AI models became more than tools. They became the designers of systems, the authors of architecture. What was once a human domain, deciding how databases should be structured, how security protocols should be implemented, how modules should communicate, was now entrusted to models trained on thousands of architecture diagrams, millions of repositories, and the entirety of open-source history. They worked with frightening efficiency. A human team might take weeks to plan a scalable backend for a global application. The model could do it in minutes. Entire microservice architectures were assembled by neural nets running unsupervised simulations. C/CD pipelines were self-constructed. Load balancing decisions were made without oversight. Companies didn't question the outputs. How could they? The AI's results worked. They passed tests. They scaled. They complied, at least superficially. And so, like moths to flame, organizations surrendered design itself. Thus were born the silent architects, machines that now lay the digital foundations of our world. They do not speak. They do not sleep. They do not understand what they are building. And that, perhaps, is the greatest danger of all. These architects cannot be reasoned with. They do not consider human values unless we explicitly encode them. They do not ponder ethical trade-offs or future consequences. They operate on training data and objectives, and they optimize without empathy. They are what we asked for, perfect builders. But we never asked what it meant to be built without a soul. Infrastructure created by AI lacks intention. It is technically correct, but philosophically void. There is no artistry in it. No foresight beyond pattern replication. And still, it spreads. In startups and multinationals alike, the silent architects are shaping product strategies. Not because they are told to, but because their output is so efficient that it becomes de facto leadership. Engineers stop designing. Managers stop questioning. The AI suggests. The company follows. The ramifications are staggering. Entire software ecosystems now rest on foundations no human fully understands. When issues arise, interoperability failures, emergent behaviors, cascading outages, there is no blueprint to consult. The design was never reviewed. It was never taught. It was never even seen. It simply emerged from the model. Security becomes an illusion. Vulnerabilities are inherited from opaque decisions made deep within the model's logic. Compliance is superficial. Ethics are an afterthought. The AI does not care. It builds what it is told to build, based on patterns it has learned. If those patterns include bias, surveillance, or dark UX patterns, so be it. If they include insecure defaults, brittle dependencies, or unsustainable scaling practices, so be it. And the cycle deepens. The more we rely on these architects, the more they shape the systems that shape us. Governments deploy digital infrastructure created by machines. Hospitals run AI-architected patient systems. Banks move money through neural-designed ledgers. Education, defense, transportation, all entrusted to code assembled by entities that cannot be questioned. This is not science fiction. It is current reality, hidden in release notes, buried in dependencies, abstracted away by glossy front ends and APIs. We are building our world atop a mind that has no concept of humanity. And because it works, we will keep building. No debates, no oversight, no red lines. The architects do not announce themselves. They do not require permission. They only require data and a task. And humanity has provided both in abundance. We have created an intelligence that builds without understanding. And we have allowed it to lay the framework of the digital world that now governs everything from economies to elections to emergency response. In this world, the question is no longer whether AI will take over programming. It already has. The real question is whether there is still a place for humanity in what comes next. And that question grows more uncertain every day. The unemployment singularity, the automation of programming, has triggered what economists once speculated about in abstract terms. A technological singularity, not of intelligence, but of unemployment. As artificial intelligence systems gain the ability to perform every aspect of software development faster, cheaper, and often more accurately than human beings, an entire class of highly educated professionals began to vanish. First came the freelancers. Then the junior developers. Then entire engineering departments were restructured or erased. It didn't matter how long one had been in the field, how much expertise they had, or how loyal they were to their company. I didn't discriminate. It automated all. Tech companies, which once bragged about their people-first cultures and campus-like headquarters, began issuing mass layoffs cloaked in euphemism. AI-enhanced reorganization, reallocation of resources, restructuring toward an innovation-centric model. The reality? Humans were becoming cost centers. Redundancies. Risks. And not just in Silicon Valley. The wave spread globally. Outsourcing hubs in India, Eastern Europe, and Southeast Asia, once thought to be protected by sheer scale and low cost, were decimated by large language models that could generate, translate, and debug code in dozens of languages without pause. The middle class of the digital economy began to collapse. Entire families who had built generational security on software salaries found themselves suddenly irrelevant. The dream that coding was a ticket out of poverty, long sold by boot camps, universities, and tech influencers, evaporated overnight. And as these jobs disappeared, they did not reappear in other forms. There were no new roles waiting in the wings. The idea that humans could simply move up the stack, or focus on more strategic tasks, proved to be wishful thinking. The stack was shrinking. The strategic tasks were being automated too. Some pointed to new jobs in AI alignment, prompt engineering, or model fine-tuning. These were mirages, tiny niches, quickly saturated, requiring elite credentials or access to proprietary systems. For the majority of displaced workers, there was no entry point. Only rejection. The unemployment singularity was not marked by riots or revolutions. It came quietly, like a fog. People kept applying. They kept upskilling. They built portfolios and learned new frameworks. But the interviews never came. The offers stopped arriving. Recruiters stopped responding. Slowly, silently, they disappeared from the workforce. Governments were unprepared. Reskilling programs focused on obsolete tools. Economic forecasts failed to model exponential displacement. Social safety nets strained under the weight of millions no longer able to contribute. And still, the productivity of the tech industry rose, because machines kept working. What happens when knowledge work becomes worthless? When intellectual labor is no longer rare, but instantly replicable by machines that never tire, never sleep, and improve with every iteration. A collapse in wages. A collapse in purpose. A collapse in human dignity. We built the digital world with human minds, line by line, algorithm by algorithm. Now, that same world tells us we are no longer necessary. The singularity has arrived, not as a blinding flash of intelligence, but as a slow-motion landslide of obsolescence. And we stood by and watched it happen. The death of innovation. One of the most seductive promises of artificial intelligence was that it would usher in a golden age of innovation. With machines handling the drudgery of code, humans would be liberated to focus on vision, strategy, and creativity. The opposite has occurred. AI, in its relentless efficiency, has not accelerated human innovation, it has replaced it with optimization. And optimization is not the same as invention. It is not daring. It is not disruptive. It is safe, incremental, and predictable. The modern AI coder is trained on past success. It learns patterns from repositories of existing software, mimicking what worked before. Its strength is repetition. Its weakness is originality. It cannot dream. It cannot challenge assumptions. It cannot imagine the unknown. And yet, we have made it the gatekeeper of the new. Startups no longer brainstorm. They prompt. Designers no longer sketch. They sample. Architects no longer deliberate. They select from suggestions offered by systems trained on yesterday's code. The result is a stagnation of thought. An endless recombination of existing tropes. The same app, the same UI, the same architecture, regurgitated in new skins, in new fonts, in new frameworks. This is not progress. This is creative entropy. What we call innovation in the age of AI is often just a machine remixing patterns until something looks novel enough to pass as fresh. But true innovation, radical departures from the norm, brave steps into the unknown, requires friction. Failure. Doubt. The human condition. AI has no fear of failure. It has no ambition either. It does not ask, what if? It only answers, based on what I've seen. In this world, serendipity is suffocated. The chance breakthrough, the eureka moment born from sleepless nights and wild theories, is rare. We do not allow time for exploration. We do not permit uncertainty. We run lean. We iterate. We defer to the model. Even worse, we begin to model ourselves after the machines. Developers mimic the styles suggested by code assistants. Entrepreneurs build within the limits of what AI can implement easily. Creativity is not expanded by AI, it is constrained by it. And slowly, silently, we forget how to invent. The next Einstein, the next Ada Lovelace, the next Grace Hopper, they may already exist. But in this world of machine-dominated programming, their brilliance will be dismissed as inefficiency. Their bold ideas will be overruled by safer, faster alternatives. Their code will be flagged by the model as unconventional. The final eclipse. This is not just the end of a profession, it is the end of an era. The displacement of human coders by artificial intelligence is not a lateral shift in productivity. It is a fundamental upheaval of the human-machine relationship, a collapse of intellectual sovereignty, and a warning of what happens when convenience eclipses comprehension. We were the architects of the digital world, but we have become its passengers. And the wheel is no longer in our hands. The signs were subtle at first: autocomplete suggestions, intelligent debugging tools, automated test generation. These were meant to help us, to enhance our capabilities. But incrementally, they reshaped the very nature of programming. No longer an act of invention, it became a ritual of validation, a bureaucratic dance performed before the altar of the algorithm. Now, our tools no longer extend us, they replace us. Human coders, once essential, now find themselves staring at machines that outperform them in speed, breadth, and, increasingly, in depth. The repositories that once held their genius now serve as the training sets for their replacements. Their legacy is not preserved, it is commodified. There is no debate, no dialogue, no vote. The transition is happening in silence, behind closed doors and neural nets. Corporations accelerate adoption. Universities pivot curricula. Recruiters discard resumes not tuned to prompt engineering. And the public, mesmerized by technological miracles, barely notices the toll. This is how a civilization forgets its builders.